I think it's an overlooked thing these days, and we're going to talk through the whys and through some resolution for it. So don't be shy as we go. Please feel free to ask questions. I love if people are willing to unmute. If you can't or won't, or it's just not a reality for you, go to that chat. Ted's going to be helping keep an eye on that. All right, I am Joy Apple, Microsoft MVP and a modern workplace strategist at Joy of SharePoint on social. If you're out on social media, I would love for you to connect with me. As you can see, I've been doing Microsoft products and technology stuff for a minute now. I don't want to do the math. I've worn several hats in my journey from there to here. Farm admin, a trainer, a consultant. I've gone through being a CIE facilitator. Every step, excuse me, every step of the way, having solid requirements has just become more and more obvious, because we can't give you something if we don't know what you need, or they give us something, it doesn't work, it's not useful. Every step of the way, we need those requirements. Let's jump in. Okay, what the heck is a requirement and why should I care? It's something that is required. I always laugh when the root word is used in the definition of a word, but it's something that's wanted or needed. Now in IT, we know typically needs need to come first. I need to be able to communicate with my coworkers and my external counterparts. I want to be able to communicate with my family real time too while I'm at work. Right? Maybe there's some better examples of that. Wants and needs. And it's also something that is essential, like security is going to be an essential requirement for protecting our intellectual property on the job, right? The things we need, the things we want to be able to do our jobs. And we don't want to be frustrated while we do our jobs. So we need these requirements to be able to do our jobs efficiently. We need to be able to empower our business users to do their jobs well. And honestly, my opinion is we spend most of our life at work. So we should be trying to do everything we can to reduce frustration, because that's where we are most of the time. So if we start looking at rolling out tools, such as the Microsoft 365 suite of tools, we're looking at Teams, we're looking at SharePoint, Forms, of course, Outlook, the Office suite, Power BI, Power Automate, To-Do, Planner, the list goes on and on and on. So having all of those features and all of those options available make it even more important to know how our business teams work, so we can create an environment that has the functionality and the features that they need. And if you're here as a representative of a business, IT has to know. I'm going to be very honest. Let me take a sip of coffee and fortify myself before I say this. IT people, don't get mad, because I've been there too. Sometimes IT people don't want to know all the inner workings. We're like, look, you got email. What more do you want? You can email anybody. Come on, get off my back. Okay, but I can't attach this super huge file, right? Or maybe I need to be able to send secure information a certain way, but email won't let me because of DLP policies, right? We have to have these conversations. If we don't, the chances are we're just not going to get very far. Okay, I'm going to poke over and just keep an eye on chat too, just in case. Looks good. Awesome. So IT, from the IT perspective, and again, I have said many a time, sometimes in IT, we kind of have that same God syndrome, little g God syndrome that doctors can have, right? Because we know how all these tools work. We know what we're supposed to be using for chat. We know what we're supposed to be using for file share. We know. So look, here's SharePoint, here's Outlook, here's Teams. Just use it, right? Why do we have to talk to people? Just do it, roll out the tool, done, easy peasy. So sometimes from the IT perspective, we're guilty of saying, we know best, here's the tool, figure it out, have a nice life. I've seen many a SharePoint implementation wither on the vine because of that exact mentality. And then those of us that are on the business We're like, oh, what's the point of talking to IT? They don't get it. They don't understand the intricacies of contract management. They never will. They don't get it. They're going to give it, oh, fine, they gave us SharePoint, but what are we supposed to do with it? Why can't we just go get what we need? Why can't we just use Dropbox? I have Dropbox. I use it with my family, so I'll just use Dropbox to work with, my vendor. It's easy. And it happens. But slow down, right? We kind of got to slow our roll just a little bit. It says if we don't communicate, we don't understand governance, we don't get the tools configured the way we need, and then we go do exactly that. We have Box, we have Dropbox, we have Slack. I have seen a person sitting at lunch talking about work and sharing content in Facebook Messenger because they weren't allowed to use chat in Teams. What? That's terrifying. I also know of a situation where, was it Dropbox? It was either Box or Dropbox, like the corporate side of that company called a company who was a new client for my company. And they were like, hey, we see there are a lot of Dropbox accounts associated with your company's email address. If you just got one big corporate policy, you could probably save a lot of money, and we could give you some features that you don't have with the personal accounts. We don't use Dropbox. Oh, yes, you do. You just don't know it because your users had a need, and either because of lack of information, lack of communication, lack of training, they didn't know they had tools that could meet that. When that happens, we start to have shadow IT, or you may hear people talk about rogue users, right? Those two words, they mean almost the same thing, right? What the heck is shadow IT? Definitely not ninjas, but it would be much cooler if it were. It means that I, as a user, have a need, and I've either not been told or given the tool at work to meet this need. So I go get my own. I start using Slack or Telegraph to have business conversations because chat's not been rolled out inside of Teams. I can't put a big enough attachment in my work email because that limit's been dropped down so low. So I use my Gmail account to share a file with a customer, right? That's shadow IT. The common areas of this rogue application use or shadow IT is going to be file sharing, meeting apps. Well, I know we could use Teams, but we don't really get it, so we're still using WebEx. Or it's just a few of us where we do free Zoom. Could be a problem. If you're using free Zoom, there's not a lot of security around that. Those third-party chat apps, pick one, right? You could throw a brick and you'll probably hit 3. Teams is one of those. I saw yesterday that Teams for personal use is going to be coming. And as a Teams fanatic right here, I'm going to have to be very careful. Separation, work and life, right? But what's the big deal, right? We want users to take initiative, right? Absolutely, we do. But not in the sense of I'm going to go download a tool because I can and use it. So if I'm using my personal Dropbox account, there's no data loss prevention around that. There's no way that my company can see where this contract went, who has it, and what's being done with it. If you work with sensitive information like social security numbers or credit card numbers, things like that, in Microsoft 365, we can create a policy that says if Microsoft tools detect a social security number, it will not let that go outside of the organization's domain. You can't put it in chat with a vendor in Teams, or you can't have that in an email and send it to someone. You can't have a document and attach it with a social security number and email it if they're not on an approved list of where that could go. I can't do that with my Gmail, right? Or my live.com or my Hotmail or any AOLs out there, right? It doesn't exist. So we have now taken important and sensitive information and put it outside of security. And I know it feels like Big Brother to say, oh, but if you use your personal email, then the company doesn't know what you're doing. That sounds very Big Brother. But if you're talking about the company's intellectual property or a coworker's social security number, that's a big deal. That's a really big deal. So how do we keep people from feeling that they need to go to the dark side? Sorry, I have to have a Star Wars slide somewhere in a presentation. Why do they do it? how do we keep people from doing it? Well, the top 4 reasons are the tools we've put out aren't meeting their needs, or they don't know that that tool is available. I'm a compulsive clicker. Just curious. Anybody else? Let me go to chat so I can see, or you can raise your hand if you want to. Anybody else out there a compulsive clicker? If you see a button or a link that looks like it's clickable, okay, I see some hands going up. Right? It's kind of the rule of 80-20. Chris, thanks for chiming in there. 80% population probably is not going to click that button because they don't know what it will do. 20% is like, ooh, shiny button, what does it do? Right? We're all familiar with the app launcher that is everywhere inside of Microsoft 365 or the waffle. Curious, feel free to go to chat. I need interaction. Chat, tell me, is it the waffle or is it the app launcher? I should do a Twitter poll and see what we call it. But either way, I know if I click that button, there's more buttons to click. 80% of us will never go click that because waffle, heck yeah, because we don't know. We don't know what it's going to do. We don't even know it's clickable, right? 20% of us are like, what's that? Oh, it highlights if I hover over it. The waffle launcher, I like that. If I hover over it, ooh, OneDrive, ooh, Excel. I have never in my life said, ooh, Excel. Ugh. PowerPoint, right? 80% of our coworkers and colleagues aren't going to go hover and click that. So they don't know that right here is Forms. They can get to PowerPoint. They can go to SharePoint. I have been in many a meeting where people are like, well, how do I just know all the sites that I go to? Is there a way I can get to all my SharePoint stuff? Yes, go to the waffle and click the SharePoint button. What does that do? Oh, I didn't know that was there, right? Bad relationships with IT, right? Maybe it's unearned, maybe it's earned, I don't know, but today's a new day, right? 2020 is almost over. We're going to be going into a new year, new you. It's time for IT and the business to talk, to communicate, to have these conversations. Maybe it's not that it's a bad relationship, it's just IT seems unapproachable because the ticket system. Well, I put in a ticket and then I wait in line and then they never really know what I need, so why bother, right? A lot of different reasons how this can happen. Get my slides back. But what if I told you that requirements are the solution? Requirements can also equal conversations, because if we don't communicate, you can't know. And it's like that for any relationship, regardless if it's IT in the business or friends and family. You can't know stuff if you don't communicate. So it's time to meet with the business. Business, it's time to meet with IT. It's time to have these conversations. It's time to get to the bottom of what we need, why it's not working. Why do we have Dropbox? Why are you using Slack? How come when you have a problem with email, you go and just use your own personal account? It's time to have these conversations. IT, I want to talk to you specifically on this particular slide. We have existing tools, we have business success, right? And the best way you can get from existing tools that you have vetted, that you have configured, and that you have deployed in your organization is to have a picture of what a day in the life of your business users looks like. How do your departments work? Who do they work with? Why do they do the things they do? Why do they still have paper forms on their desk? Time to know a day in the life. Requirements from the business let IT understand how the current processes work. And if we understand how you work today, we can help you work better tomorrow. And I don't mean better as in you're not working good today. I mean, it could be smoother. Could be more efficient. Maybe we can stop forcing you to track down someone so they physically put a pen to a piece of paper. I can only imagine how hard that process has been in the last, what are we up to now, 7 or 8 months? So if we find out how our individual businesses work, business talking to you now too, right? If we can understand how you as a department, a functional business area, a project team, if we can understand how you work, if you'll share that with us, oh, we can help so much. IT is a service department. And I'm guilty. I'm guilty of forgetting service department, not a dictator, right? We're not all knowing. Just a little arrogant sometimes because we Google, so we know things. We sit down and figure out all those little microcultures that are within our department and internalize that there is no one size fits all inside of Microsoft 365. Oh, we can do so much together. And we do that by starting with the basics. Who, what, when, where, why, how. Who remembers that from like high school and college, right? Investigative writing. Who are we working with? What are we doing? When are we doing it? Where? Why? How? Who is on the team that's coming to us for help? Or who's on our team? Who does this team work with? Is it just internal? Is it cross-functional within the organization? Is it just internal work, or is it external outside of the organization as well? Those are really important things to know. Let's think about teams, for instance. Okay, let me go back to my show taskbar, back to teams. Okay, who here is already neck deep in Teams? You use it every day. We can do show of hands if you have fun stories, Travis. Thank you. Leah, Robert, awesome. Beth, hey, Ted. Okay, awesome, awesome, awesome. Barbara, I see you. Cool. I love it. One of those first hurdles when we get into teams is thinking about, okay, who's actually on this team, right? And then who do we need to work with? How are we going to collaborate? Because we have owners, members, and guests inside of our team. So we really have to step back and think about our team when we start to build a team. We are going to build out a team today. Woohoo, it's going to be exciting. All right, what is a big slide? And I'm sure if I had put more thought into this, I could have way more on here, but then we couldn't read it. What kind of work does this team do? What kind of work does this team do? Do we collaborate with other areas? Do we go outside? What if? I love what if questions, right? What if we automated some of the approvals that the business is doing? Does this team need to publish from Teams in their team site to a communication site on the public side of the intranet? What kind of tools are they using now? Can we consolidate those? Are we using Outlook tasks and To-Do and Planner and a checklist on my desk and Post-it notes and sticky notes and lists in OneNote? Can we bring that all into tasks in Teams? It's still called Planner, but it will soon one day be called Tasks in Teams. What doesn't work? Hear me, IT people. I feel like my preacher. If we can go talk to a business and find out 2 or 3 pain points, this hurts, this is hard, this doesn't work, and fix it, that is a great day. And we've just made a new friend in the business. And that's a powerful thing to have. Business. I promise you, there are people in your IT department that love solving problems. They love fixing things. If you can go and say, we've got this thing and we're just not really happy with how it works. It doesn't feel like it's right, or we just feel like it should be more automated. Can you help us? You're going to have some excited IT people there, but they can't know if you don't tell them. What do you need to be able to do today but can't? Right? That's a powerful question. What you're sitting going, it's 2020. What a heck of a year this has been. But technology has advanced considerably in the last year, hasn't it? What should we be able to do, but we're not doing it? Why does it feel so hard? Take that and move on. This is how some of us ended up working, finding the solutions to business problems. You are so right. Okay, this is not on the agenda. How many of you, Joe, this may be you. Okay, Joe, how many of you ended up in SharePoint or Microsoft 365 accidentally? And I can raise my hand to that. I am absolutely an accident SharePoint pro. I love it. I love it. I love it. True story. Okay, when? I'm going to keep going down, back on track. When does this business group does this business group have times where today is not the day for change? I heard that we're rolling out Teams. Please don't bother me today. I just can't. It's a legitimate concern. And if you stomp all over that, you're burning a bridge. Does this team prefer that real-time, active, awesome chat communication? I do. It's fantastic. Or is an email queue more appropriate? I'm working with some people right now, and the goal from their business, or I shouldn't say their business, from the client's IT department, everyone's going to Teams. Well, this group works with, what is it called? The requests for information that's covered under the Privacy Act in their state. And she said, if we have these conversations recorded in chat and Teams, we now have to declare those as records and manage them. Don't have those conversations in Teams, right?
Hey, Joy.
Yeah.
I'm just going to jump in here real quick for a second. So with the customers that I work with, I hear a lot about people talking about, hey, we've just deployed Teams. Users hate it. But how do you start that conversation to address that? And maybe you're going to talk about that coming up here. But I just, how do you fix that? People may be used to Zoom or something. It's
because it's different. It is different. And part of that's going to be on the why slide. Ask the question, why? Why do you hate it? Go back to what's not working? What feels complicated? What doesn't make sense? And in the last half of this, we're going to build out a team. We're going to pick a team to build. We're going to talk about channels. And it might be that age-old thing of, what the heck is a channel? I don't get it. What am I supposed to do with these things? It might be that those aren't making sense. But definitely, that's a great conversation. Sit down and say, okay, why? I hear you that you just are not liking this. What's causing it to go awry? Knowing where people are coming to this thing can make a difference too. Are we just suffering because we're working on our residential internet connection? Is that making it difficult? Or sometimes we're logging in from the office and sometimes we're logging in from home. Is it that when we log in on our home IP address, we're being forced to do the authentication code through multi-factor over and over and over and over again? That could be a pain point. Where are the documents now? If those people that are hating Teams today are still having to work on content on a file share, on VPN if they're working remotely, oh, that would suck. Right? If you're living in that world, I'm so sorry. The first thing we need to do is figure out how to get that content into SharePoint, because SharePoint is the document management solution that Teams uses. So kind of bringing everything together may ease some of that pain points. Change management is key, like giving someone wood, saw, and hammer, nails, telling them to go build a house. You're absolutely correct, Jeremy. That is so true. Here you go. Figure it out. Nobody likes that. Where do these people publish to or from if publishing is part of it? Are they going to take content from inside of their files tab in a channel in Teams and publish it to a communication site? Or are we going to pull it out of that collaborative place just into another library in the team site because it's team private, not company public, right? How they work and where they work are going to be super important. Why are we changing? Are we rolling out Teams just because, hey, it's shiny and new and awesome, everyone should have it and love it? I'm guilty of that. I was guilty of that with those people that were working with the Privacy Act information. But then when they told me why they were hesitant, because now all of our chats have to be declared as records, and I went, oh, so maybe you don't need a lot of channels in your team. Maybe you need to mostly use Teams for your meetings and having calls so you can verbally communicate, vocally, and then manage your content in SharePoint the way you have been, just in a modern site. Getting off 2010, hallelujah. Why stay the same? Those sound like the same questions, but they're very, very different. Why are we changing? Are we meeting needs? Well, we are all going to SharePoint Online, so we have to get you into a modern team site. That's legit. But I refuse to use Teams. Why? To help me understand. These third-party tools that might still be out there, why are we still using WebEx when Teams meetings, they're bundled in, no additional fee, right? Well, what's the use case? Well, we've already paid for the conferencing numbers in WebEx, so we're going to see that out to the end of the licensing, and then we're going to get the new numbers ported over into Teams. Legit, right? There's a business reason. How does this department prefer to work, prefer to engage? How are they using, oh, my word cut off. How are they using the tools now? How do they work together? Do they prefer to hop on a call, or do they prefer to have it text-based? Teams is 100% built for Teams if it's done right. So if we go through and we ask the who, where, what, when, why, and how questions, it starts to define how we can come in here and build the team, what the team needs, who's going to be on the team, why we have security around our team, right? We get all of that information and start to build that team around it. And then it starts to become pretty powerful. Now, I will confess, it is not uncommon when we're first really starting to fine tune a team. You get in there and you think, that's great, I've got this exactly right, it's perfect. And then you go, oh, well, I see this channel's here, but nobody's using it. Or man, they've got a lot of subfolders in the files tab. And that may need to be reconfigured a little bit. Don't be afraid to step back and change. It's not admitting failure, defeat. It's going, oh, the standard way, or the way I thought was right, now that we're in here actually putting our hands on it and using it, isn't really fitting for you. Let's make it fit. Let's work on this. So let's get started. I'm going to do just a little bit of Teams 101 just for anybody that might still be a little bit new, or maybe thought through some of these things all the way. So when you're talking about teams, and when I say this, that the team is the permission structure, what I mean is, just condense these. Every time I see the name of a team here, the people that are in this team are bound by security. This is my security structure. Now, it could be that one of these teams is open to the whole company and anyone can walk in and join it. Or it could be like the HR team, that's a private team. And only the people that I put in here have permissions inside of the team. So the team is your security boundary. And for my SharePoint folks that are here, keep in mind, we can always, remember, we can open this in SharePoint. And when you're in SharePoint, you see /site/, that's your site collection. That's your security boundary. So that's your permission level. If you're in that team, you're on the team. I cannot come into a team and say, okay, Joe and Ted, we're going to let you be in the team, but you can't edit documents and you can't chat. It does not work that way. You're in the team, you're on the team. Members and guests can edit all of the files in that Files tab. We're all in this together. Teamwork makes the dream work. Private channels are a thing. They're a very real thing, but they should be an exception, not a rule, because when we start introducing private channels, it's kind of like the equivalent of granular permissions on folder structures or sites inside of SharePoint. We're going to talk through the logic of that in just a few minutes. Okay. Types of teams, public and private. Public teams can be joined by anyone in the organization. They can be found by anyone in the organization. So if I come here, this is the join and create team. If you've got it set up that not everyone in your company can create a team, they'll just see join. And they can search and find the fun team. That's a public team and can join it. Private teams, they have to be added in explicitly as a member or a guest to the team. Guest means they're external. They've come in from another company, from outside of your organization. Teams does allow for org-wide teams. I think you can have 5 org-wide teams in your tenant now, up to 5,000 people. That limit either has recently or is about to go up. So keep that in mind. If you have an org-wide team, everybody's in. Everybody automatically is a member of the team when it's created. That's all, all users except externals come into that team. It's like the Hotel California. You can come in, but you can't voluntarily leave, but you could get kicked out by an owner if you act rowdy, so you got to behave yourself. The anatomy of a team. When we see a team, we see the team name, and then we have our channels. This is where the work gets done. Inside of a channel, you're going to have posts, files. That wiki tab is there that can be removed if you don't like it. I didn't realize so many people hated it until I saw the feature that you can now remove it, and you can add tabs. So each one of these is where stuff is actually happening in our team, which means if we're approaching a business to say, okay, we're going to create this team for you, it's going to be tied to your team site. If we've been in SharePoint for a while, that's where we're working and doing. What do you do? Wiki. Go. Yes, add the OneNote tab if you don't like wikis and you love your OneNote. We'll play with that in a minute. How do you work as a business department? How do you work as a team, a group? How do you work as a functional business area? Your channels created to support how you as a team work in teams. General is the freebie. It's the shared documents version for teams. You get it. It's where you can start typing, talking, working, uploading, tabbing. At Pate Group, my company, we do consulting. So it's almost too easy because every time I get a customer, we create a team, right? I have a customer called Excelsior. So we're going to have our Excelsior team. The first thing we're going to do for our customer is deployment planning, which means requirements gathering. So I create a channel. Channels organize our communication and our content. So if I'm going to talk about deployment planning for Project Excelsior, I'm going to do that in the deployment planning channel. If I have a document like the roadmap and my architecture that I'm creating for this customer, I'm going to put that in the deployment planning channel because that's content that has to do with deployment planning. If I have a onboarding flow, we're implementing and the customer has said, hey, we need a flow for onboarding. Okay, we're going to go create a channel for that. So my developers can get in there, my designers can get in there and then go design this onboarding flow. All conversation and content that come out of that go in the channel, right? But on a project, it's easy. It just defines itself. It does get more complicated if you're talking about the way people work organically inside of a department. But we're going to get there. Look at the information we gather when we're talking to our businesses. What channels would facilitate how this group of people is going to work? And if you're still not sure and it's not clear and they're like, I don't know, I will say, go put a meeting channel in there. Just call it meetings because everybody has meetings, especially these days. You can't get through a day without having like 5 or 6, right? Let them have channel meetings and see how their notes for the meetings grow and evolve and stay all one thing as time goes by. They can have their whiteboard sessions. They can upload documents. Maybe every week when they have their weekly touch base, they upload the agenda and the roster, and the full history of their meetings can live in that meeting channel. That's pretty nice. And then we cheat. If we're still not sure or they don't know, we just can't get out of them what they think would make sense, go look at their documents. Because I'll guarantee they're going to have some, if they're in SharePoint and they're doing SharePoint the SharePointy way, they're going to have some libraries that they work in a lot. If they do it the semi-SharePointy way, they might have a couple of libraries with folders. Go take a look at that because that's going to identify what they work on. And if they're working on it, they're probably talking about it. And that's the definition of a channel. Channels are where we as a team come together and have that fast and furious collaboration. And maybe mostly chatting and posts, and that's fine because we're working through the process. But any content that comes out of it is going to live right there. So it really can start to define what those channels need to be. So I'm going to ask you all a question. What kind of team do you think we should build today? Should it be an HR team? Should it be a safety team? Should it be a training team? What do we want to do? Let's build a team. A Teams rollout team. All right. Okay. Let's see what we got. I've got a slide later about the templates that have come out. I mean, we could absolutely cheat and see if there's a Teams rollout team here. But you know, retail, quality and safety, that's kind of nice. But let's build our own. Let's build our own. Let's start from scratch. So private, people need permission to join, or we put them in there. Public, anyone in the organization can join. I'm going to roll with private, I think. How do we feel about that? Do we like private? We good with that? Nobody shouts out, no.
Yes, go private. Teams are closed. They work best as closed loops, small closed loops. And org-wide teams is like, why?
I have a couple of whys. We can talk about that at the end.
Yes, there are whys. There are reasons, but default, private.
Agreed. Totally agree. Why? Because we're paranoid. No, we can talk about that towards the end, though. We're going to create a team. Nice work. Okay, so let's talk about what we just did. We just created a team, which means right now in the background, all of the little elves that live inside Microsoft 365 are going and creating a SharePoint site. They're creating that general channel. They're creating the Microsoft 365 group, Planner plan, a OneNote notebook, the email address for the team, the group calendar. I think that's everything. All right. And because this is my sad, lonely demo tenant, I think I can only add like Bob to it. So Bob user is going to come in. I'm going to add him. Okay. Should Bob be a member or an owner? It's dangerous to go alone. If you are inside this wonderful world of teams, please don't just have one person be the owner. You need more than one. So I'm going to be an owner and Bob's going to be an owner.
Hey, Joy.
Yes.
Beth asked or mentioned that she thought that Yammer was is the org-wide team. Can you talk a bit about the difference?
Absolutely. And I'm going to confess something. This has been a growth year for me coming on board with this. Yammer in the past, like literally up until about 6 weeks ago, annoyed me so much I couldn't stand to even talk about it because I've seen it be misused. But now that we're getting neck deep into Teams and we get notifications, right? And that's just like right there in your face all the time. There are ways to fix that. We're going to talk about it. But it really does work best, and I'm seeing it, if you're not in the government like Joe, to use Yammer for your organizational-wide learning groups, more social side of things. So if I'm using it as an area of information on how certain things work in the organization, not where we work in the organization, it'll work a lot better for us as human beings. So then when people are just chatting and sharing things that don't impact my teamwork, I'm not being distracted by it, but the notification from Teams. I go to Yammer when the time is right to consume that helpful, that learning and informative information, rather than having it blasted out to me while I'm trying to do something. So I'm growing as a professional, I guess, because I was like, this is starting to make sense. My company is super small. 20 of us, 25, somewhere in there. We do have an all company team and we're all in there, and we have a channel. We have a fun room channel where we share the most hilarious gifts and memes of the day. We have a technology channel. We have our general channel where we just make team announcements, birthdays, work anniversaries. It works well, but we mute the ones that aren't critical for our business process, and we just go catch up when the time is right. If you're on the big side of small, approaching medium, I would really start to consider Yammer for that more informative groups of learning, areas of expertise, channels of your organization. So Joe's making some really good comments in chat. Yep, the community sites in SharePoint, oh, back in the day. That kind of stuff is great in Yammer. Go learn, we have time, instead of having it barge in like Teams can do if we let it. Do you teamwork in Teams, and the other stuff can happen inside of Yammer. All right. So I have a Teams rollout team here. Since I'm on the Your Team section, notice there's really no rhyme or reason how these are organized. I'm going to bring this one up top. If you are on a lot of teams and it bugs you that they're not in alphabetical order and you're not in them all the time, hide the ones that aren't critical for you. It'll alphabetize for you. And then if someone at mentions you, you'll get that notification. You can't not get an at mention if it's a personal one. And then just rock and roll in the ones that you're currently active in, right? Let it work for you. So Teams rollout, general. Here's that general channel. This is great. You could come to the wiki if you want to use the wiki and just have some general information here that has to do with everything for the Teams rollout. So if we're on the Teams rollout team, maybe this is the IT team. How many times are we going to say Teams, right? So many. I'm thinking, well, I have in my mind how I'm thinking about doing the channels, but I want to get some opinions. How are we thinking it would make sense? Please feel free to unmute and talk. You're fine. This is a safe place. A training channel might be useful, or maybe we're thinking about certain businesses that we want to approach first. What are our thoughts for the channels?
How about governance? Creating governance document?
So should governance be in general, or should we have a dedicated governance channel?
Well, I think if we're going to have specific discussions related to governance, it's almost as if it's a mini project within the major project. So it's a task, or there would be an individual group of people that are working on governance. And it just makes it easier. So when you have a question on governance, that's where you go.
I totally agree.
And it shouldn't be a document, but that's a whole other webinar. Thanks. So training, I think.
Here's
training and communications.
In my opinion, on a governance document. Yeah. If you can't enforce it, don't write it down. Right, because then it starts to be meaningless. And
guidelines.
I like that. And if it's 50 pages, it's time to start editing, because no one's going to read it. And if nobody reads it, it's useless. Unless we want to go take it and beat people with it. And maybe some days we do, but we shouldn't. All right. So governance, automatically show this channel and everyone's channel list. I'm going to use that power. Number one, because I can. Number two, this is an important one. So I'm going to add that channel. I love it.
Questions?
Well, questions goes to, I mean, this is where you would have the questions, I guess, but like training.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe also communications / change management, so that the comms people can get their things. There's always comms people.
Communication is critical. You want to start early, communicate often. Hey, world, we're going to start rolling out Teams. It's not happening tomorrow, because that would be mean. We may not even know. It's going to be in the spring 2021, a fresh start in Teams. Whatever, Teams is blooming, whatever, have fun with it. But just letting them know it's coming can ease a lot of anxiety. What can you do to get ready? Maybe you don't have to do anything yet, right? Maybe to get ready, you could start thinking about spring cleaning, right? What can be archived? What could go other places? Just soft, gentle communication. We're not spamming them. This is what you can do to get ready. Yes. And I heard training. Training is super important. I'm not going to automatically add this one to everybody. I mean, you don't have to do that all the time, because remember, Teams is a very personal thing. My communication planning people might be super interested in governance right now, but the training folks are in there just going to town, and all those notifications are driving them crazy, right? So they might come in here and hide training for now. Mute the channel, get it out of their way. They're not hiding it for anybody else, but it's silencing all those those notifications that are just becoming a little too noisy. Would we also want to add a description for each of the channels? Descriptions are metadata. Yes, that would help when people search for it. It would make it findable. So thank you for calling me out on being lazy. But yes, we would want to have some descriptions there. In the real world, I'll try to do better. Okay. Let's think. I'm going to also consider adding a channel for the department that's going to go first. And I'm not going to make it IT because that's too easy, right? IT, we're always like, well, we'll go first. We'll click the buttons, and then the things we do, maybe if we're lucky, 20% of them will apply to a normal business in the organization, right? IT does not work anything like human resources. So I'm going to volunteer human resources to go first. Is that okay with everybody?
Definitely not IT though.
It's just not fair.
No, it's they just have different. They need different. They're used to different digital workspaces, and they like their own. And it generally doesn't apply to quote unquote business processes.
Exactly.
So now, are you going to have a channel for each division?
I would say probably, at least for this initial rollout, because we're learning.
What would you put in human resources? That's not, that you can't say for everybody. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. I do. New employee onboarding. There might be some conversations we need to have around that to say, okay, panel, how do we want to handle new hires? Oops, see, I'm a terrible typist and you're watching and it's just so intimidating. Not in the system yet. Right? They don't have usernames yet. Maybe it's a candidate. We're going to be sending an offer letter, or HR is. We're not. We're in IT. Right? How are we going to handle that? So we can have that communication here. If HR has a document for how that process works now, that would be great to have in the Files tab. So we can kind of talk through that, have it, know how that process works. How does that sound, everybody? Does that seem logical?
I would think that you would put that in a HR team's team.
Well, let's talk about that. So this is going to be, I know this is in my mind, which does not mean that this is the way that would work for everybody, but this is where those of us that are working on the rollout would have these internal, how are we going to approach this conversation? But perhaps where you're going with this, Robert, I think, yep, okay, I see your circle, is maybe we do want to have a cross-functional HR. Oh no, you got the corona behind you.
I do.
HR IT team, because for a couple of different reasons. Now we can have these conversations with HR. We can trick them into using it a little, getting them used to it, sneaking in a little bit of early user adoption, and have those conversations inside of Teams. Give them a space to come to us before, during, and after implementation and rollout. If they want that document, of course, we want to be careful that we don't have it in both places, right? We could always have a tab to that document. Maybe it's going to be in the Files tab in that team we share with HR, and we could tap to it because we'll have access to it. And then that way they have it in their home too. A lot of different ways this could go.
Yeah, I mean, just to me, it could get really crowded depending on, you know, divisions, and then you're going to have different things within each division, and it just could get crowded, I think. But I mean, again, there's multiple ways to skin a cat here.
And the cat hates all of them, much like our users when we're not always super happy about it. But The way it's been working so far is IT have that, okay, here we go. This is our huddle. This is our spot. And then having those cross-functional teams where they can come in, have the questions, get answers. I've seen that work well. I've also seen several companies just create a Teams team, and I've even seen it just called Teams. Okay. Where it's open to anybody to come get help after rollout, and having channels much like they have here inside of the help. Y'all been around Microsoft very long at all? Isn't it awesome that when you click the help button, there's really super useful, informative information there, but can come in, look about what's new, creating channels to get people going with this kind of information. So I've seen it done a variety of ways. The most important thing, like Robert's saying, is to make sure we're planning for scale, for organization. And in here, we might even start thinking about tags. Creating tags and the people that get a notification when that tag is mentioned. Tags are like metadata for Teams. Just like in a library in SharePoint, we would have columns and we would categorize and tag content. You can tag conversations here too. So this could help with that organization. Here's just an HR team I set up. Talking of HR conveniently, we want to help HR too when it comes to rolling out their team. What are the odds HR is just going to get one team and everybody's going to work in there and that's going to go well for them? Slim to none. Because HR is probably going to also have benefits, wellness, compensation. And let's be real, HR is super involved in new hire onboarding. That's going to be a team where they're going to need to work with IT, accounting, payroll, all kinds of things. So HR is going to need a lot of teams. They're going to need one for every way they break out, but they might also want one where all of the main offices of HR can just come talk about the things they do together as one department in the company, and then have their protected private spaces where they can work individually. And this is one of those things where people start to sit back, get the deer in the headlights look and go, that's going to be a lot of teams. It is. But you get what, 2 million site collections now in your tenant? I think that's the number that Microsoft bumped us up to. Do you need to plan for scale? You do. Can we all just roll out and bump up 2 million site collections at once? No, right? But we have the room to grow. And we have the room to create it in such a way that it works for these people. So if HR gets 5 HR teams and a cross-functional one, awesome. That's not too many. And if people start panicking, if you're that person and you're like, that's a lot of teams, let's step back and look at the way HR organizes their information. What are the odds they're working out of more than 5 or 6 libraries and or folders? Probably pretty good, right? I was working with a lady at a company the other day. She said, oh, I've got all of my content organized really, really well. I've got a 200 folder structure. 200. Her own personal 200 folder structure. And I got tickled because her coworker that was on the call said, yep, she does. And I have to call her every time I need anything because I don't understand her folders. Right? So if you take that thought of, well, I have 200 folders. 7 teams, 6 teams doesn't sound like a lot at that point. Right? When we make it work for the team, it will take time. There'll be different opinions, but the tool absolutely gives us the scale to be able to do that. One thing we do have to be very careful with as we're building this up is to not fall into that habit of putting subfolders inside of files. And there's a couple of different reasons. The Microsoft world, if you've noticed lately, has gotten very flat. And a lot of us old crusty SharePoint people, you've probably heard us gripe about folders a lot all along the way, right? My favorite phrase is folders are the F word in SharePoint. Because it's true, they could mess up a lot of stuff. But hey, Joy, when I create a team and I go and I create channels, I get a folder for all my channels. Yeah, you sure do. I wish you didn't, but you sure do. That tells me we really need to be careful not to nest folders inside of those for a couple of different reasons. Let me get my teams back. So if I'm in here talking about, I don't know, training, I'll go to training. Let's give it some love. There's probably a lot of things we're going to need to do training on. And if I come into files and I start building out folders for, what are we going to train on? Security, the SharePoint site that's in the background, moving content from teams into other libraries or between channels or between teams themselves. If I start nesting that in folders, odds are as a team, we're going to need to actually have conversations about those because I've taken the time to identify it. We're probably going to want to talk about it. So there, and Robert, we're coming back to where you mentioned, that could start to get really crowded with the folders. So we might even decide we need a rollout training team instead of just a channel, or we could use tags. We have options on how this can scale out. But I always encourage people, try a channel first because your channel is your folder. Let's dig into private channels. Anybody using private channels out there right now? How's that working, Jeremy?
Okay, there are some limitations. Challenging that you can't, integrating a plan into a private channel. You have to go a roundabout way. You have to go and create the plan on its own, and then you have to attach it so you can't necessarily integrate it directly into it. Yep. Other challenges with meetings, you cannot embed a meeting. You can't have a channel meeting within a private channel. So
yeah, yep, absolutely. So yes, private channels are a little bit different. Joe, I see you've come online.
No, all of the things Jeremy just said and more, like, because private channels are their own hidden off in the distance site collections. So they have different retention policies and different problems that are hard to find and hard to get to. They are most definitely misused most of the time. I have seen a team with 10 people and 9 private channels because the boss made a private channel for him and each one of his subordinates so that they could submit drafts through those so that then they could then put them into the team so that the entire team could talk about them. And it's like, why are you're hiding this stuff from yourselves and you expect to work together?
Right. Because if you're in the team, you're on the team, right?
It's a change in mindset. It's a collaborative mindset versus an individual relationship mindset.
My stuff. Yep. This is my draft.
Well, the illusion of control or the fact that nothing's ever really done, nothing's ever good, nothing's ever perfect. We all work better together when somebody finds your stuff and says, well, this could be clearer and this could be better and this could, oh, great, thank you.
Yep.
I didn't know.
Absolutely.
I know what works for me. Yeah.
And it's a paradigm shift for sure. And, OneDrive is definitely our friend here. It's a topic for another day about how easy it is to get your OneDrive stuff into Teams, into SharePoint. If it's time to go to the team, put it where the team is. So yes, private channels definitely can add some complexity, some frustrations. Jeremy, similar to your example there, I got an emergency call from some folks. Like, we need a couple of hours of your time. We've created a team for a department, and then we gave every sub-department their own private channel, and we can't get anything to work. I was like, nope, you sure can't. Because private channels, as Joe said, Teams actually goes out there, talks to SharePoint, it spins up a whole other site collection. Because the security best practice for Microsoft 365 for SharePoint is we secure the largest object possible. Never, ever, ever, ever should we ever have been creating folders and libraries and applying unique permissions to them on any large scale basis. Bless you, Jeremy. It's just not the best practice for security. So Teams and SharePoint are going to follow the best practice and apply the permissions at that site collection boundary. So a few ways we're going to have a hiccup there is when I create a private channel, all those folders that get created in SharePoint, those are the standard channels in that site. That private channel is going to go be its own thing. Let's create one. So let's see here. I'm going to add a channel. I'm just totally going to make this up. I have a hard time internalizing when in this situation I would truly need a private channel. IT management. Let's actually try to spell that right. That would be amazing. And we'll make it private. Accessible. This is key. Now, I know we always read every drop down and every pop-up that ever pops up on a computer screen, always. Accessible only to a specific group of people in this team, within this team. Okay, next. I created it. I can only add people that are already in the team. And sometimes this is where we first kind of trip over it. I'm just going to skip this for now. So I'm going to go to my, just pick a channel, any channel, and I'm going to use this ellipses way over here, going to open in SharePoint, right? And when I open a channel in SharePoint, it puts me in the folder that receives the files for that channel. So every time I create a channel in Teams, it's a folder in SharePoint. No IT management. What the crap, Teams? Okay, IT management. Open in SharePoint. Teams rollout dash IT management. And if you snuggle in really close to your laptop screen, you can see in the URL. It's its own separate site. I have expanded my architecture by one more site by creating a private channel. But if that's a legit need, do it, right? Security is important, but we need to be thinking about our security needs, not our security want. If I click on documents here, right, it's just that one. If I create another private channel in the team, it's not going to show up here. It's going to be on a site named after the channel. Why do we care? Well, because as Joe mentioned, Jeremy mentioned, I'm telling teams, okay, I'm creating this special spot that only the people I say can be in there. You're only bringing in a segment of your Microsoft 365 group. The planner plan, the shared inbox, the group calendar, all of those things are scoped for the entire group, right? Because if you're in the team, you're on the team. When I call that out, I'm saying, nope, everybody out. It's just these folks. They're just going to share these pieces of content, and they're just going to have these private conversations. So let's talk about, I think I got my slides out of order, but that's okay. Let's talk about this thing called private channels, because this is super important. Is it a requirement to have a private channel, right? I've been asking this question a few times, and actually, apologies, I just realized I have the wrong slide here. I'm going to make the slides available, and I'll make sure to get the right one in. There's actually two questions we need to be asking. Are all of the people that we want in this private channel or this private area, are they all part of the same team? And is it a breach of security if we have this stuff that we're holding in our hand? Is it a breach of security if everyone on the team sees it? Those are the two questions that I've come to in the search to find when a private channel fits in. Are they all on the same team? Yes. They're already in the Teams training rollout. And no, it's not a big deal if everybody in the rollout team sees the stuff. But I just want to organize it for them. I don't want them to have to see it if it's not something that I think they're going to be working on. That is not justification for a private channel. That's a channel that everyone has access to, and we teach them how to hide it so the notifications aren't overloading them. And then they can go consume the information in it if they want to, or if someone mentions them and say, hey, we need your help. What you got, Jeremy?
One of the things I will typically think about when I'm working within teams, creating channels, private channels, I will always ask myself who else could benefit from knowing this. And it might not necessarily be active versus passive, right? So there's a lot of times that people actively need to know what's going on. But what we fail to understand and what we fail to consider many times as we're working in groups is where's the passive communication, where's the passive knowledge that's going to be helpful for others. They might not necessarily need to know it then and there, but having the ability to at least see that is going to increase the overall knowledge within your organization. Absolutely. And your team. Many people don't think about that. So,
well, if we go back to like my project Excelsior, my developers may not really care if they're working on a Power App build or the onboarding flow. They may not be super interested in all the gory details of the migration, but it might be that just knowing what's going on informs them of when it's time for them to come up to bat, right? Just knowing what's happening in the project overall as they have time can benefit them. Yep.
And it's a fundamental change in mindset that many people don't have. I would say a small percentage of most people don't think that way. It's their blinders. It's what they're working on with an individual person. And you can really tell that by looking at individual chats. And I know you're going to talk later probably about looking at statistics, right? When you actually look in the admin console, the people that have high private chats within the chat thing, those are typically the people that aren't using conversations, that aren't using channel conversations. So it's actually, there are really good tools to be able to determine who's doing that. And then you can start to have conversations with them to see if they can't. You can directly target them to say, hey, there's a different way to think about working within a team without being an a-hole. So that's the hard part.
Right. That is the hard part sometimes. I love that. Thank you, Joe. Same. I'm totally stealing that. You don't have it trademarked, that I hope, because that could be a problem. All right. So if security is the same, it's not a breach of security if everyone on the team sees this content. Go for it. That's a standard channel. We just need to teach people how they can finesse their channels. Yeah, we can talk more about analytics. That can come up towards the end. So what if, as we're talking about this, we say, no, the security, the permissions, the audience, that's what I'm looking for. The audience is different. I've got some other people I need to bring in from another department to come into this private channel that I'm creating in my team. Then at that point, you go no further. I cannot bring in new people to a private channel because they're not in that Office or Microsoft 365 group. If you're already talking about bringing in new people, we need a new team. We need a cross-functional team. And then we get to the, sorta. Yeah, it's everybody that's in the team. I'm not bringing in extra people. They're already on the team. But it is a breach of security if everyone on the team sees this. Maybe, and the example I have in my project team, maybe it's the invoices and the billing that my project manager and my company president work through for every project. As the implementer of that project, I don't need to see when they pay their bills. I don't need to see that information. It is a breach of security for me to know bank account routing information, but they need to manage it so the project gets funded and paid. That's a great example of a cubbyhole that we're building into our team. So we know we're meeting the needs of having all of the information within the team, but only the appropriate people see it and have access to it. So private channels really should be a cubbyhole that we're introducing into the team based on security needs. If you find yourself bumping up against the limit of 30 private channels in your team, we may be misusing it. And as Jeremy said, if you need something like Planner, you can do that, but you do need to start from Planner and tab to it inside of your team to get those resources back in. And while we were in there, let's talk just for a minute about the tabs.
Hey, so, Joy.
Yes.
Just a heads up that we're 15 minutes out from the end. So.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. So when we're talking to our business, right, we're coming back to those requirements that they gave us. Do they work with other third-party tools that are legit, like John Hancock or Concur, things like that, ServiceNow? Is that a tool that we use for ticketing? We can absolutely partner with them to find out those resources that they use day in and day out and make those tabs inside of Teams. So now we're reducing context switching for them. So we've already debunked multitasking. That's not a thing. The new battle these days is context switching. We're inside of Teams. We're talking with our team. We're doing work. We realize, oh, I need to go to this other tool, to this other website and get this information. Maybe it's even a SharePoint site. So if we don't tab to that, that means I'm closing down Teams. I'm going to my browser. I'm finding a tab, or I'm going to the internet, or I'm having to find a note or a document to go get to it. And I've probably wasted 10 minutes, not just to find the site and get logged in, but to get focused again, getting back and forth between all my stuff. But if I utilize the tabs across the top of my team, make it an easy button for my business to click on it, open it up, and have the content right there, we're saving them time, and we're keeping them focused in one application, so they're not wasting that focus going and breaking out of Teams to find that other information. So that's a big deal. Microsoft really is leveraging Teams to become the service application platform for Microsoft 365. That's a bold statement, I know, but I think it's accurate if you look at the way they're starting to leverage what we can do inside of Teams. So real quick, she said, hopefully, when I am inside of my Teams, if there are other areas that these groups need to go, these tabs just make, oh, let's not do it inside the private channel. Get out of there. Ick. Absolutely, they can come in here, get to that information. One thing that I'm really starting to encourage my clients on is use these channels for your collaborative content and conversations. If you have stuff that you just reference, it's not active collaboration. It's not going through edit cycles. I need to go see the invoices. I need to go see the policies and procedures that we have for implementing new security, because that could be part of our governance. Can absolutely tab to it and have that easy button to go reference this piece of information. Maybe it's on my HR team, right? See, it's guiding me through all of the SharePoint sites I already have access to as a user. So I could go find procedures, tab right to it, save a step, save myself, save my team, save this department from having to go elsewhere to get this content. And we just tab to it in the channel or channels where it's going to make the most sense. So I can open it up, I can work on it, I can do whatever I need to do, I can just reference it. It's not part of that fast and furious stuff we're working on actually inside of the team. Channels and notifications, working with your business. I hear a lot, we're drowning in email. It's killing me. Now we're coming into Teams, and now I'm drowning in Teams notifications. So I would say, if you haven't already dug into the different ways you can manage notifications and enable your business users to manage their notifications, there's going to be a lot of pushback from Teams just because of the amount of noise it can create, especially in those early growing days. The only mention, where it says here, replies, mentions, and reactions, mentions and replies, the only mention you cannot turn off or mute is the personal @mention. So if someone @mentions Joe Dunn, Joe's going to get that notification. He can't hide from it. He could ignore it, but he's going to get it. Other than that, you can choose what's going to make noise. You can choose what's going to pop up in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You can choose what's going to send you an email. You can get an email immediately if something happens in Teams. I wouldn't, but you can. Or you could say once a day, or you could say never. Have options.
Yeah. Hey, Joy, as part of the
Yes.
change management plan or implementation plan, combining the notifications with that mentality of who else could benefit from knowing this, that active versus passive, is vitally important, because what it does is it reduces the noise but still makes things available to you. So I think as you're thinking about implementing this org-wide and trying to get onto that, they have to understand and know that they can turn things off so it's still there, but it's not becoming noise. Because that's one of the first things many people say about Teams is you're trying to tell them move from Teams because you don't want so many emails, and they actually get more notifications once you move to Teams. So it's about now it's about reducing the noise.
And there's a very definite middle point where it starts to feel a little bit chaotic before it has come over and that break has made between what comes into Teams and what's coming in through email. And I try to warn people as they're rolling out Teams, there's going to be that growing period where it's going to get a little bit hectic and it's going to get a little bit difficult, but then it gets better. It definitely gets better. I'm going to skip through that one. So I've got just a little very simple form that you can absolutely get to that has some of the gentle soft skill questions that I ask of folks when we're getting started with Teams, or with just trying to get some basic requirements for how people work, what they do, what it looks like. If you want to snag that, feel free. It's not super technical. And if you're approaching the business with a new tool, starting in a not super technical way can absolutely be beneficial, because we want to know, but we don't want them to feel that they have to come into any kind of crazy technical interview. They don't have to know anything about what's going on inside of Microsoft 365 to be able to get started telling us how we can make it better for them. All right, we got just a couple of minutes. I'm going to come back here to Teams, she said when she hit the button. So some of the things, analytics is not the most amazing thing out of the box, I'll confess. I feel like it's kind of like SharePoint analytics, where it starts to give you just enough to make you want more. There's a couple of different places we can approach analytics for Teams. And I'll confess, I hadn't planned to talk a whole lot about this, but we've got a few minutes, so let's do it. And I'm also going to confess, you guys are my guinea pigs on this session. It's the first time I've presented this together from a few different things that I do. So please, when feedback time comes, please be honest with me, because I want to make this better. And I already know to bring in more analytics. So all channels, you can come through here and see, if you're an owner of the team, what's going on. This one has very little engagement because it's brand new. But you can get a snapshot. And just like a lot of our analytics here, we can only go back about 90 days. The admin center as well, it's still going to be about the same. But on a teams by team basis, you can come here, kind of see what's going on, see where people are coming in for this information. Are they using it for meetings? What does the engagement look like? I'm going to bring over the admin center one as well. This is going to be overall Teams usage. I'm going to switch behind the scenes to my live demo one. Let me get that out of your way. Out of the box, you can come in and see the different things that you can run these reports on. The device usage is pretty darn cool. What are we using to get to Teams? The mobile app, I would say Teams is one of the first tools Microsoft released where the mobile app is about as good as a mobile app can be for the desktop counterpart. It really is fantastic. And same for the web application. Using it in the webs right now, some of the things you can't do is going to be like the fancy background stuff, but it's powerful. It's not a one-to-one, but it's a pretty darn close relationship in features and functionality.
Hey, Joy.
Yes.
Hey, this is Beth. What I was particularly wondering about on the Teams Admin Center, where it says active users, and it has that little bar chart for your two team names down below, or that little graph. How do they define active users in Microsoft? What does an active user mean?
I'm going to get back to you on that because I think the way they use it in here is people that have come in and actually interacted with this team in some way in the time frame. But if I were to say that is the gospel truth, I might be wrong. But if you'll let me, I'll do some research on that and get that back out to you.
Thanks. That would be great, because I've been wondering that, and have been asked, is this team active or not, and wondering what that really means.
What that in truth in Microsoft speak means.
Exactly. Exactly.
I'm going to come. So when I'm doing training, I come to this. This is actually in my PATE group tenant. And this is what I use. So we can see here in the last 7 days, we can see the posts, replies, mentions, reactions. Reactions are important, right? Here are my active users again, and we can kind of come see the ebb and flow. So I didn't do any training there. And then we come up over time and can see. This gives us insight too, just in that spike on user activity. So what was going on the project? Was this a day when something was happening? Was there a problem? Pull that out of a project perspective. If we were to go look at human resources and we see a spike in activity, we can check in and say, hey, we saw that you guys were super busy. Were you getting something set up? How is it going? Is there something you need from IT where we could help make those busy times better for you? I mean, it's a little babysitting when you get started, but when you roll out a new team for folks, they'll appreciate you touching base with them and just kind of keeping an eye on how that's going.
Hey, Joy, I'm going to have to jump in. We have 2 minutes out. I have to give somebody $25 gift certificate, gift card. I do, and I can tell you who that person is. It's Patrick Drews. You had to stay in for the whole time he's there. Patrick, you're on, correct?
We think he is.
Well, I see him in there. Hopefully he's not away. But I'll need you to send me a message with your address or your email address so that I can get that to you. And I'm going to take over as well. There's Joy's information right there. I'm going to take over to, we have a survey that you'll actually fill out at the end of the day for the entire meeting. It won't be for just the Joy's presentation. So I would recommend that if you want to give her some feedback, give it to her directly there at that information that she's showing. So. All right. So thank you so much, Joy. That was fantastic. I think everybody else probably enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you guys for all the interaction. That's been great.
Fantastic. Looking forward to when we can do these things face to face again.
Yes, I think we all are. I'm going to show the survey link, but like I had mentioned, it's going to be one that you're going to want to do at the end of the day. Thank you, Joy.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Thank you all for hanging out with me today. And yeah, please touch base with me here. Let me know what you think. I appreciate your feedback.
Awesome. We'll be kicking off here. I don't see Hugo. Hugo, are you in yet?
I am.
Oh, excellent. We're just going from one to another. So thanks everyone for coming in. Joy's just finished up, and Hugo will be starting with his next section, which is 5 Power App platform solutions you should build. I've seen Hugo's past presentations, and I'm a big fan. So I think everybody should be pretty excited about this one. But we'll give people a few seconds to switch from whatever track they're on. I think we'll try to start about 3 or 4 afterwards. 3 or 4
that sounds good.
minutes afterwards. I will let everybody know, Hugo, at the starting about the rules. And can I take over just for a little bit? Just I'll turn it over for you.
Absolutely.
Congratulations, Patrick. I got your information. Thank you.